Nicole, thank you, and to the team at the Virginia Chamber for working to help make this seminar and interactive platform so effective. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this regional meeting. The Blueprint Virginia Regional Tour is excited about coming and partnering in the GO Virginia Region 3. In a few minutes, I'll recognize Randy Lale, who will give an overview of Region 3 from a GO Virginia perspective, and also Linda Green, who is representing the Virginia Economic Developers Association, whom we are partnering with. So hopefully you will be able to thank them when you see them in person. I very much would like to be in person, as your region is one of my favorite regions in the Commonwealth. Randy knows this. My father was born in Charlotte County, and I got to spend my summers there, and I really enjoy this part of the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I'm sorry we can't be in person, but the new platform that we've been able to work with has allowed us to reach out across the Commonwealth and through strength of partnership, be able to effectively lay the groundwork for Blueprint Virginia update called Blueprint Virginia 2030. So welcome to each and every one of you. It's my honor to serve as president of the Virginia Chamber, finishing my 11th year. And this is our third blueprint, and we will present this blueprint to the governor-elect December 3rd, so mark your calendar for that date. We'd very much like for you to be able to participate in person, and look forward to the work ahead with you in partnership. I do want to acknowledge a few people before I get started, but just to say that this is intended to be very interactive. Although we are coming to you through a virtual platform, we've dedicated 50% of our time together over the next 1 hour for you to speak to us about what your priorities are. If you joined early, you probably saw the open discussion questions. So as I am presenting and as Randy and Linda say a few words, be thinking, are we effectively capturing what's the most important priority for your region? And make a note of that. And what have we missed, if we've missed anything? Because really the purpose of this is to be not a top-down Blueprint Virginia, but a bottom-up, a region up. I've had experience at the local level and professional and political experience at the statewide level. And the last 11 years, and here's what I've learned, that economic development really occurs along economic boundaries. And economic growth occurs along economic boundaries. And you all know what the economic boundaries are. And thanks to the GO Virginia region, you have some priorities established. You've got a wonderful leadership group. And we want to hear from you as we develop a statewide plan that very much respects the economic boundaries of the region. So Randy, thanks to you. I also want to say that GO Virginia is supported by the Department of Housing and Community Development. I want to thank Eric Johnston as well as Sarah Dunnigan for their support. For VEDA, I want to thank Connie Long. She really helps run VEDA, and I'll recognize Linda a little bit more. We have some regional and state chamber partners. First, our state chamber partners across the Commonwealth is our Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Michael Sejour, and also the Asian Chamber of Commerce, Mylan Tran. And then you may be aware there are over 100 local chambers that we partner with at the state chamber. The local chamber is the voice of business for you in your locality and in your region. I want to thank Alexis Earhart from the Danville-Pittsylvania County Chamber, and Wendy Wright and Ray Thomas from the Brunswick Chamber. I want to thank the Halifax Chamber of Commerce and Mitzi McCormick, and of course the Martinsville Henry County Chamber of Commerce as well, and Lisa Watkins. Thank you all so much. Some of my board members are on. Alan Witt, who I'll introduce later, is our chair. Ask him to say a few comments and close us at the end. I also want to thank Connie Nyholm. You all know her at Virginia International Raceway, and a member of my executive committee and a past chair of the chamber, Ben Davenport, who you all know at First Piedmont. And I also want to thank past board member Tim Clark of Blair Construction, who's been so supportive, and many others of you that have been so supportive and served on the Virginia Chamber in the past. Thank you for joining us today. And I'll recognize some of our steering committee members as well a little bit later when I go through the organizational chart of Blueprint. But I do want to thank Danny Marshall, a very pro-business, business-friendly delegate who has received numerous awards from the Virginia Chamber for signing up to be here today, and the president of AVRIT, Tiffany Franks, as well as the incoming president of the Virginia Tech Foundation, Elizabeth McClanahan, who you all probably already know, former Supreme Court judge, but someone who will bring fresh new leadership and build on the foundation of John Dooley at the Virginia Tech Foundation. So all of you all are very important. Thank you so much for being here. So let me just, before I begin my PowerPoint, ask Nicole to give you some reminders about using the chat feature if you want to comment on what I'm presenting, or raising your hand if you want to speak a little bit afterwards. Nicole, would you like to give one more reminder before I begin?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody, and I will keep this quick. Thank you for being with us today. There are a couple of ways to engage. So throughout the presentations, if you do have any questions or observations, you're more than welcome to use the Q&A feature. We'll go ahead and get to those during the open discussion portion of our meeting. Additionally, we hope that you will be willing to provide remarks during the observation open discussion portion of our meeting. If you would be willing to do so, please use the raise your hand feature, and a member of our team will promote you as a panelist to where you can turn your camera on or keep it off and just address the group for any observations you have for the priorities of the region. If you have any technical questions or issues, please go ahead and use the chat, and a member of our team will assist you. Again, we appreciate you being with us today and look forward to a great discussion.
Thanks, Nicole. Laura, if you will share the slide for me, and I will go through my slide presentation, and this will take about 10-12 minutes, but please use the chat feature if you want to send me a message or I have a question. We'll look forward to hearing from you later. So next slide, please. Just as a reminder, I mentioned the voice of business in the region and the locality. We at the Chamber at the state level are the voice of business for the Commonwealth, and regularly are called upon to speak on behalf of the business community for Virginia. And the blueprint is a document that policymakers look to answer the question, what does the Virginia business community think about particular issues and priorities? Next slide. As you probably know, we are a nonpartisan organization. We're a business advocacy organization, but we don't endorse candidates, we endorse ideas. Next slide. Thanks to our alliance membership with about 95 local chambers now, our actual membership is approaching 28,000 member companies in the Virginia Chamber. We're the largest business organization in the state, and thanks for your great representation in your region. Our goal, is simply stated, is for Virginia to be the best state for business. It's laser focused, and all that we do is to ensure we have a business climate that helps your businesses grow and thrive. We've been recognized also for our quality of life. In 2019, Virginia was listed as the best state for quality of life. Next slide, Laura. Just a couple of rankings you may not have heard of. Of course, you may have heard in 2019, CNBC ranked us the top state for business, but Wallet Hub in 2020 recognized our schools as the best in the South, and the best state for higher education, #2, was Smart Asset. A couple of other rankings. Business facilities, we were ranked last year in 2020, #1 for cyber security leadership, as well as digital infrastructure. Some other things we can be proud of. #3 for workforce, #2 for business climate. Next slide. We also saw some innovative rankings come out last year. Virginia was ranked 5th in innovation, and we're excited about the recognition, still room to improve. We're also ranked in the top 10 by US News, and we were also recognized as #5 in equality, and this is a new ranking that's beginning to surface based on some highly publicized events in the last 12 to 18 months in America, and we're ranked #11 for economic opportunity, and we are leaning in on these matters as we develop the Blueprint 2030. Next slide. This ranking just came out. I'm really pleased to announce that we stepped up 3 spots in Chief Executive Magazine. This is not quantitative. It is purely an impression that CEOs have of Virginia. I think we should be a top 5 state, and so there's more work to do there with CEOs. Next slide. So why Virginia is such a great place for technology, and why does over half the internet traffic every day come through the Commonwealth of Virginia? We'll take a look at this map, which is instructive regarding the actual location of large major data centers in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I think this is just going to grow even more in the future. And with mid-Atlantic broadband and the work that's taking place, Randy, across the southern part of the Commonwealth of Virginia, I think your region is going to be more connected in the future than ever before. Next slide. And likewise, we're becoming really well known as a tech ecosystem. You heard a lot, you saw the ranking earlier about being ranked at the top for cybersecurity. We have a wonderful technology platform that businesses recognize, and just take a look at these companies across the Commonwealth of Virginia and in your region. Next slide. So your region has had one of the most successful economic development track records in terms of announcements and activity per capita than any region in the state. And I won't read all of these, but I thought I would show them to you. It takes several slides to go through these. Next slide. Just as a reminder, Region 3 consists of all these communities, which you know about, and you can see it there on the map of Virginia. And that's the GO Virginia region. And the population is about 373,000, annual wages about 34,000. And then these targeted industries Randy may mention, but they are part of the targeted industries that have been prioritized for your region. Next slide. And then this is a listing of the companies, the county, whether it's manufacturing or non-manufacturing, what kind of project, is it existing or is it a new project, how many employees, and what the capital investment is for each of these announcements. So we total 2019, and then there's another page for 2019 continued, and then one more for 2020 for economic development announcements, and then another page so far this year for economic announcements. Again, per capita, this is the busiest region in the state. The next slide will show you a summary from Region 3 economic announcements from 2019 through 2021. And I think it's most interesting to see the number of new and existing, and most of the state has about 90% of their job growth coming from existing businesses expanding. You all have a great ratio of existing and new businesses coming to your region. So let me congratulate you. You all are doing a lot of things right, and we're excited about continuing the momentum with you. Next slide. You've heard about Blueprint, and perhaps if you are new to this call and new to Virginia, you haven't been involved. So let me give you a little background on this process. After about 1 year during the 2013 governor's race, we presented our first Blueprint in 2013 to Terry McAuliffe at a economic summit in November of 2013, and he worked with us to implement that, and our business ranking started to move up directly after 2013. The next Blueprint we presented to our current governor, and in 2017, directly after he was elected, and we've been working with this governor and his administration, members of the General Assembly, on a nonpartisan basis to make Virginia the best state for business. So we anticipate doing that again in 2021, and we are looking forward to presenting the Blueprint 2030 to the new governor. These are 9 competitive areas that we built the Blueprint 2025 on, and we have similar areas for Blueprint 2030 with a number of additional areas, but these areas are all priorities for us, and you'll see some of the polling results in a few minutes. Next slide. We've been on a roller coaster, but if you combine the quantitative and the subjective rankings of chief executive, CNBC, Forbes, and site selection, you'll see we began to climb back up as a Commonwealth and improve our economic capacity when sequestration came to an end and we began to rebound from the financial recession. Virginia is on its way back up in our national rankings. Next slide. The big question for the business community in Virginia is, will our elected officials continue to support pro-business and business-friendly initiatives to keep us competitive? I think it's our responsibility across the state as the business community to speak into that process. That's what Blueprint Virginia 2030 gives us an opportunity to do. And by the end of this year, present to the next governor and the new General Assembly that seats itself in January of 22. What are the priorities of the business community over the next 10 years? What do we want Virginia to really look like? And how do we get there? That's what Blueprint Virginia will do. I hope we continue to move up in our rankings. Next slide. What are some of the economic challenges that we're facing in Virginia? I'll quickly recap these. One is the time of this recession. We have seen recessions in the past in our country and in Virginia. And if you take a look at this slide prepared by Fuller Institute at George Mason, the gold is the 1990, how long it took to slide into the recession and how long it took to come out. If you look at the financial crisis of 2008, how quickly we got into that recession, how much time it took to begin to recover with job growth. But look at the dramatic drop last year. All of us experienced it as a result of trying to solve a healthcare crisis, created an economic crisis. But now we're beginning to come back in a very fast pace. I'll show you some other stats related to Virginia. The Fuller Institute estimated about 40% of the jobs were lost. It's going to take some time to recover, and we have some projections on that as well. Next slide. The COVID impact on our unemployment rate year over year is pretty dramatic, although since February 21, we've begun to improve, and you all have seen those statistics in March and April that are coming out. So thankfully, we're getting closer to where we were, but it's going to take some time. Next slide. The impact on unemployment in the country, of course, dramatic. 8 million jobs lost nationwide. So many benefits were paid out, and we saw a big decrease in the number of small businesses. Next slide. This is the Virginia number for small businesses. The decrease was about 31% from January of last year to March of this year. Tremendous for the outward-facing community of the Commonwealth, non-essential retail and hospitality and the like. Next slide. Regionally, this is how the numbers look. We had this prepared for your perspective as well. The lighter shades were actually impacted a little bit less than the darker shades. So in this regard, Southern Virginia had less of an impact than some of the other regions. Next slide. Not a surprise that the specific areas of impact, though, were in leisure, hospitality, and non-essential retail. Next slide. So what is it like to recover for the Commonwealth? The Moody's Analytics and VEDP has analyzed our growth, and based on current projections, it looks like Virginia will get back to full employment levels somewhere around the second quarter of 2022. Next slide. When you begin to think about rural Virginia versus the urban area, you see the urban areas are projected to get back a little bit sooner than that, and almost a year later for rural Horseshoe to get back to the baseline of employment. Next slide. So we also know that the economic impact did not hit us all evenly, and we care about all population groups in Virginia. And this was just an analysis that we wanted to look at with VEDP regarding how it impacted less educated, minorities, women, and lower wage workers, significantly more than the knowledge-based workers that we've seen be able to work remotely. Next slide. And this is just another way of presenting some data regarding population groups. And again, if you look at the dark blue, which is 2021, and the lighter blue, which is dark blue 2020, and lighter blue, which is 2021, you'll see significant impact on our communities, Black and brown, and also some, obviously our persons with disabilities regarding unemployment continue to struggle. Next slide. Some of the other challenges are our workforce themselves. That was a challenge going into the pandemic. It continues to be a challenge. And we've yet to see the long-term impact of students losing 1 year of in-person education. We've seen a decrease in some of our community college enrollment. And obviously, we know we have a global competition for talent. We also know that America is not producing as many of a number of technology graduates, science, technology, engineering, and math, and healthcare that other countries are. This continues to be a focus of connecting learning to earning that we have at the Chamber. We hope that will be able to be something we can work with you on as well. Next slide. I also want to recognize the healthcare challenges. Fortunately, we've had broadband, but not everywhere. And we know we need to continue to invest in that, especially as it relates to the dependency on healthcare in the future, and protecting employers' ability to provide health insurance without significant cost increase. Many of our major insurance carriers are doing that this year in their renewals. Next slide. Obviously, it's brought about the focus on aging infrastructure. We're very hopeful there'll be a federal bill that is bipartisan that helps all regions of the Commonwealth and our country overcome the challenges that we have with our infrastructure. Next slide. And housing is so connected to economic development. We're seeing a unique time right now with housing. These cycles have occurred before, but very low inventory and very high demand. And we know that houses are so critical to economic development. We need to think about that as we develop Blueprint Virginia 2030. So what does Blueprint Virginia 2030 look like? What's the process we're using? I'll close with this and give you some survey results. We have a steering committee led by CEO of SAIC, Nasik Keen. We also have Dominion Energy's Ed Bain on the steering committee, and we have an advisory board as well. The next slide will show you the process we're using, and you all are right in the middle of it. We invest a number of hours ensuring that all stakeholders are involved. We have a steering committee, an advisory committee, our executive committees focus on individual policies. The regional briefings and tours are very important for regional input. Our signature events and our strategic partnerships all come together to make recommendations to our advisory board and our steering committee on Blueprint Virginia 2030 priorities. The timeline is our begin our timeline with the end in mind. If you look at the December 2021 roadmap, our goal is to have the blueprint approved by all stakeholders and presented to the governor-elect December 3rd at our economic summit. Next slide. So today we're reaching out to your region. We've had 2 already, and we look forward to continuing this process throughout the summer. Thank you for participating. We have over 170 of you, which is a tremendous turnout, I have to say. And thank you for participating. And again, the December 3rd summit, put that on your calendar. So this organizational chart is one that we've built on in the past. You'll see on the left some strategic committees that are focused on specific topics, and they'll make recommendations through our executive committee. But again, bottom up, local chambers are helping us. The GO Virginia economic development regions are helping us. Thank you all for participating. And then our advisory committee and steering committee, we have a number of people on that are setting on those. Susan Horn with Lead Virginia is on our advisory committee. Helen Humphreys with AES. Deetra Trent, the former Secretary of Education, co-leading our workforce committee and on the advisory committee as well. And I think she's on our call. And then from Huntington Ingalls, we have Jonathan Arena, their general counsel, participating today. So a number of our advisory committee and steering committee people are on today, and I want to thank them for participating. And I'll recognize our chair, Alan Witt, a little bit later. Next slide. I also want to thank our sponsors, the companies that want to support the business community and our ability to put our fingerprints on the future business climate of the Commonwealth. And these are all companies across the Commonwealth that have said, we want to support this process, and I want to thank them for doing so. Next slide. We have a team of people that are on this call. I've already acknowledged Nicole, and Nicole is the one that is interacting with many of you, and I want to thank her publicly, but I also want to thank all these team members who are available to help you and are on the call today and will be engaged as necessary. I want Nicole to also go through the survey results before I introduce Randy for his presentation. So Nicole, turn it over to you.
Hello, everybody, and thank you again. We can go ahead and go right to the next slide, Laura. So one thing that I want to remind everyone, if you haven't participated in the survey, it's certainly not too late. I just put the link in the chat. We'll go ahead and send it to all registered participants again. And we encourage you to also share this link with colleagues within the region. Our goal is to ensure that we have as much regional feedback to develop the Blueprint Virginia 2030 process as possible. We are going to keep this survey open for another month, so continue to share and promote this to ensure that we are getting the feedback from members of the business community within Region 3. If you go ahead and go to the next slide, I'm just going to share some of the initial results. Next slide. Virginia's economy is headed in the right direction. We saw 20% strongly agree, 48% say that they agree, 26% neutral, and 6% agree. So it's always good to see that the majority either agree or strongly agree. Next slide. Virginia is doing a good job preparing the workforce that businesses need. 9% strongly agree, 35% agree, 35% neutral, 20% disagree. We see a significant amount of neutral and disagree, which means that there is certainly more work that we need to do in this space to support our talent pipeline and develop the workforce that Virginia employers need. Next slide. Virginia has an environment that encourages entrepreneurs and businesses to innovate. The majority of 54% agree, 4% strongly agree, 28% are neutral, 13% disagree. Next slide. So if you participate in the survey, you would note that there were about 15 different options of which areas do you believe have the most impact on Virginia's overall economic competitiveness. I certainly want to note that all of the areas are important to developing further building out further support for the overall economic competitiveness. But it's interesting to us to go around to each region to see which are the strongest priorities of each region. Interestingly enough, we've been in Region 1 and Region 2, which is Southwest Virginia, and then the Lynchburg-Roanoke region, and the 1 through 5 have been exactly the same in all regions. So number one, by an overwhelming margin in every region, is workforce and education. Coming in a close second would be business climate. Third is innovation and technology, and then 4 and 5 are transportation and housing. Next slide. If you can make additional investments in education and workforce development, where do you think they should go? Again, we've been in regions 1 and 2 so far, and number 1, 2, and 3 have been exactly the same in all 3 regions. Number 1 is further investments in internships, apprenticeships, and it was a little too long, but also work-based learning opportunities in general. Number 2 is further investments in our K through 12, and number 3 is early childhood education. Again, want to emphasize all of the areas are important, but for our survey purposes, it is important to see what are the strongest priorities for each region. Next slide. Where do you think Virginia should be concentrating its infrastructure investments? I'm sure no one here is surprised that the number 1 answer by an overwhelming margin was broadband. Number 2, school maintenance. Number 3, transportation. This has also been consistent in regions 1 and 2. Next slide. What is the most important component of healthcare to businesses and their workforce? I will say answers number 1 and 2 in the regions we've been in so far have been competing for the number 1 spot. But in region 3, the number 1 is affordability and total cost of care. Number 2 is quality of care. And number 3 is accessibility. Next slide. What is your greatest priority regarding energy? Number 1 is affordability. 2 was reliability. And number 3 was conservation. Next slide. What is the best way for Virginia to increase the number of advanced manufacturers in the Commonwealth? Again, by an overwhelming margin, build the workforce of the future. We've seen that consistent in a few of our questions earlier, that the business community's top priority continually is preparing our workforce. Number 2, increasing the number of business-ready sites for development. And number 3 was invest in research and development to grow these opportunities. Next slide. What approach would be most effective for the state to take to support sustainability efforts and encourage environmental stewardship? Number 1 was improve public infrastructure and lead by example, and number 2 is financial incentives. Next slide. I should say region 3, but what is region 3's greatest barrier to affordability and quality housing? Number 1 was low inventory. Number 2, population density. And number 3, we actually got a number of answers that weren't on our survey, and we appreciate that, and we'll take that in consideration as we develop Blueprint 2030. Next slide. What is the greatest area for improvement in preparing for the next pandemic? Number 1 is early detection and mitigation through our public health infrastructure. Number 2, economic resiliency of businesses. And number 3, domestic and global supply chain resiliency. Next slide. We're coming close to the end here, people. Now, for region 3, what is the most important potential infrastructure investment? Number 1, by landslide, increased broadband infrastructure for underserved areas. Number 2 was schools. And number 3, again, we got a number of answers that weren't on our choices, and we appreciate that as we build the regional approach for this document. Next slide. For region 3, what is the most important industry for continued growth? Number 1 was advanced manufacturing, 2, business services and IT data centers, and number 3 was other. But the majority of the other answers were surrounded around workforce preparedness and greater support for our small businesses. Next slide. So I wanted to end with, there was one final open-ended question of, do you have any additional observations that our team should be aware of? I try and put together kind of a word map of what words are most commonly used. So I don't think anybody is surprised by A lot of people had mentioned greater investments, greater support for the region, supporting our workforce, greater emphasis on housing. And there were a couple of other notes that weren't in there that I just wanted to mention. Someone had listed that rural areas need support in a completely different areas than more urban regions, and there's no one size fits all model. We saw a lot of people mention that there's no one size fits all model. We certainly recognize that and ensure and recommend in our blueprints that a regional approach is vital. Another answer that we received that I definitely wanted to mention is the continuing problem we're receiving is reaching those people who need the training and education. So there's certainly a need for greater connectivity. I will mention that the survey will continue to be open for another month. All the presentations from today will be shared, as well as a recording of today's meeting, and we hope and encourage you to reach out to our policy team with any other recommendations you have. Our surveying effort is just kind of where we're laying the foundation. We're building these recommendations. We continue to need your support to help get us to the place we are to continue to be the best state for business. I'm going to put our policy team's email in the chat, and I'm going to turn it back over to Barry.
Great job. Thank you so much for giving the results of the survey for Region 3. And you can continue to take the survey, and we'll collect all of this data. I'd like to recognize Randy Lael. Obviously, most of you know Randy, but you may not know that Randy served as the chair of the Virginia Chamber of Commerce in 2003. And I want to thank him for his longstanding support for business across the Commonwealth. He chairs the GO Virginia Region 3. Randy, thank you for being here, and would like to turn it over to you to make a presentation from GO Virginia Region 3's board. Thank you for being here and for your support.
Thanks, Barry. It's good to be with you today, and appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I enjoyed my time on the chamber board and certainly as chair, and I was actually involved in you coming to the chamber. Hard to believe it's been 11 years ago. So appreciate the job you do, and certainly the staff has always been excellent. Pleased to represent GO Virginia Region 3 today in the regional council. Our council is organized very much like the rest of the regional councils. We have to have a majority of our members as business oriented, and of course they are. It's an active council. We have 19 members, and they span the entire footprint of Region 3. I'll talk a little bit today about our regional footprint and the economy. You've heard a little bit about that, but I mentioned a couple other things, some of our high growth sectors, where we see needed investments, some of the post-pandemic issues that we know that are going to be there. Just a little bit more about our region. You saw a picture of it on one of the slides. It's the largest GO Virginia region by geography. I simply say to people that it's the size of Rhode Island and Connecticut combined. So it's a pretty good size area. The total population, a little over 370,000, and we have employment of just over 150,000. I think one of the things that's unique about our region is that there are 3 distinct subregions. There's a northern subregion that's kind of the Buckingham, Amelia, Cumberland, that area that's more closely aligned with Richmond. Southern region, that's Brunswick, Mecklenburg, Lunenburg. It's more closely aligned with Raleigh, Durham, typically. And then the western part of the region that's more closely aligned probably with Greensboro, and that would include Danville, Martinsville, but also goes up north to Lynchburg and Roanoke. And I think if you think a little bit about that, it's pretty easy to see that those communication channels are north-south. There's nothing that goes east-west. And if you look at a footprint of our region, obviously we go along the 58 corridor, and a lot of it is east to west. And so one of the things that we worked on is to try to build a relationship and to build a communication that can go across the region east to west. One of my favorite stories occurred in our first meeting where we had a gentleman who ran a propane distributorship from Patrick County, I believe, and at the end, we went around and talked about the problems that they saw in the region. And his issue was, he was having trouble finding truck drivers. And, obviously you have to be careful when you put somebody at the wheel of a propane truck. So he happened to be sitting beside Al Roberts, who at the time was the president of Southside Virginia Community College, who operates a truck driving school. That's not 45 miles or so away from where his business is. They didn't know each other. And so that's the challenge that you find. Obviously, we'll look for solutions to the east-west and that communications channel and continue to work from there. Obviously, we have challenges. We're below the percentage when you talk about the wage wealth of wages that we attract. We have an aging and a shrinking population. We're losing some of our young talent. Our unemployment rate generally is higher than the rest of the state, and our private sector wages tend to lag the Commonwealth. We have a lot of people that commute outside of our region to go to somewhere else. They might be going to Richmond, they might be going to Raleigh, they might be going to Lynchburg or Roanoke or Greensboro. And interestingly enough, I think, again, one of the best examples is the federal prison that has a facility in Butner, North Carolina, actually sends a van to South Hill every day to pick up workers. So it's, we have a lot of people that commute, and certainly a lot of folks that I know in my area will commute to either Richmond or to Raleigh to work. Some of our strengths, our wage growth has been increasing. We were seeing employment growth prior to the pandemic. Some of our industry sectors are increasing. We're also seeing higher percentages of bachelor degrees, which is obviously important. We have a lot of land. There's a lot of open space, so we have a lot of prepared sites. We have 2 mega sites in our region, and the 3rd mega site borders our region down in Greenville County. Obviously, as Barry mentioned, Mid-Atlantic Broadband, who operates a middle mile broadband, about 1,800 miles of it in Southern Virginia and outside of Southern Virginia as well, but they're certainly an asset. We have Microsoft, that's in Mecklenburg County, that's certainly one of the largest Microsoft data centers in the world. And we have a lot of fine industries that are in the Martinsville, Danville area that you saw the slides on the growth that has taken place. And I'm glad Linda's is representing here. She's certainly been a big part of that. So we have 3 four-year colleges, 3 higher ed centers. We have the ingredients here to be better. It's just a matter of getting it done. You saw what our areas of emphasis were: business services, IT, advanced manufacturing, high-value natural resources, healthcare. All of these provide above average wages, and certainly have demonstrated the ability to grow. I'll just mention advanced manufacturing. If you go back in our history, advanced manufacturing today is tremendously different from what it was 30 years ago. And so we have an education problem on our hand to not only educate the students about what advanced manufacturing means, but we also have to educate the parents. So it's not the same factory that many of us remember. Certainly I remember from my childhood days. It looks more like a clean room than anything else when you go into some of these advanced manufacturing facilities. So we have that education problem that we've got to get through. Healthcare, not normally one of what you consider a traded sector, but for us, it's growing. It's above average wages. It attracts people into our market. 3 of our hospitals in South Hill and South Boston and Danville as part of their service areas in North Carolina. And so the better they are, the more folks they attract from Carolina to our area, which means they spend money. Also, when you look at a map that talks about the health outcomes, Southern Virginia is not good. So promoting healthcare, we think, is very important. Some of the investments that GO Virginia has made over the last 3 or 4 years, I guess we've invested about $7 million. And most of our investments parallel the things that were mentioned in the slides as being very important. Our signature, I guess, project, all of them are important, but the one we've certainly spent the most money on is something called Go Tech. It puts what we call career connection labs in the middle schools in each of our jurisdictions. And by the way, there are 15 different jurisdictions involved in Region 3. And it talks about and shows students what it means to be in advanced manufacturing, what it means to be in some of these high-tech industries, so that they understand the types of jobs that they can get when they come out. They understand the amount of money they can make, and they can understand the education that they need. We think this is something that can expand. It's a partnership not only with those K through 12 systems, but all 3 of our community colleges are heavily involved in it. All 3 of our higher ed centers are heavily involved. It's a hub and spoke method we think has a lot of potential. We invested about $1 million through SVRA, which is Linda's Group and Virginia Growth Alliance, to help our businesses when it comes to supply chain and some of the impacts of the pandemic. We've had really good response to that. Linda gives us a report at each of our meetings on what's happened lately there, and we see continued work there. We spent about $700,000 on entrepreneurial system that's been developed in the region. Well, we have that strategy that is in place, and we've just awarded a grant that's included in the $700,000 to help implement that strategy, and that's being led by Longwood and also the SOVA Innovation Hub in South Boston. If the state board approves it, we have a project that will look at sites in the region that's in the SVRA territory. Linda, her group, did a great job of looking at the sites, and a lot of cooperation in that group that took 66 sites, reduced it to 33, and then reduced it to 11. And those are the sites that are in the grant. So hopefully that will get done, and we can take some of those sites and raise them from a tier 2 to a tier 4, and some from tier 2 to tier 3. Post-pandemic issues, I think we've talked about broadband. Connectivity is the biggest barrier. Region 3 is basically rural, or the majority of it is, and it impacts everything you do. I think we saw that with the pandemic. You can't go to school, you can't work, you can't do anything. So obviously, if the people that we have here can't do it, it becomes very difficult to attract folks that are looking for that. It's great to have Mid-Atlantic broadband, but we need to go more, need to go further. We need to get to that last mile so people are connected. It would be nice if we could have a comprehensive strategy of how to do that, so that each locality is not out there doing their own thing. And I guess that's kind of my opinion, but I don't know that we'll get there. But obviously, going forward, it's going to be difficult to kind of have the economic growth and the type of community, quite frankly, that we want if we don't have that. Workforce, as I mentioned, is a big deal for us. GoTech, again, just allows young people to see what's out there and what's available to them. We need to retain those young workers, and it allows young people, if GoTech is successful along with other programs, it allows youngsters that want to stay in Region 3 to have a competitive wage. And it allows them to have the types of jobs that they would like to have. And they have the skills, they have the education, they have the credentialing. And if you have that workforce, we think that will certainly be an advantage in bringing folks here. Obviously, we need the young people too for leadership. Some of us, including myself, are getting a little bit older, and we need those young folks to continue to be in the area and to lead us as we go into the future. We're looking forward to partnering with the Virginia Rural Center as it launches its Rural Leadership Institute. So we're anxious and supportive of that. We're excited about and optimistic about the opportunities in Region 3. And so we just keep working at it. It's not something that we didn't get where we are overnight. We're not going to get where we want to be overnight, but we got to keep working at it. And I think, this communication, coordination, collaboration, those are kind of those words that we need to think about. So Barry, again, thank you for the work that you and the Chamber do with the Blueprint Virginia, and thank you for your voice of business. Certainly needed today, and we look forward to hearing the discussion. So thanks for having me, and I appreciate it.
Great comments, Randy. Thanks for your leadership and all the members of your board for Region 3. Great ideas that you presented. I hope the sites development gets funded. Before we have open discussion, I do want you all to know that Linda while she wears many hats, she's also involved with the Virginia Economic Developers Association. In addition to her Economic Development Institute role at the Advanced Learning and Research facility, as well as Executive Director of the Southern Virginia Regional Alliance. But the VEDA role is the one that she's got her hat on now. And on behalf of the VEDA organization, we appreciate your leadership and involvement. I want to turn it to you for a few comments before we open it up. And again, those who want to speak, you can put it in the chat or raise your hand, and we will be calling on you shortly for the remainder of our time. Linda, thanks for being here. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Barry, and good afternoon to all of you. It's great to follow Randy Lael, who knows our region so well. But I want to say a special thank you to the Virginia Chamber for continuing to develop a blueprint for our Commonwealth. I am pleased to represent the Virginia Economic Developers Association. As Barry said, we're often known as VEDA across the state, and also the Southern Virginia Regional Alliance, but also to represent economic developers across our region. Today's conversation promises to be a pivotal and productive discussion as we think about Blueprint Virginia and the future of businesses in our GO Virginia Region 3 and across the Commonwealth. As you know, VEDA is a strong voice for shaping economic development policy in Virginia. We also strive to be the leading source of effective education and networking for economic development professionals. Now more than ever before, economic development is everyone's business. It's not a separation between one organization of professionals or one organization of business leaders, but it's all of us working hand in hand. Looking back over the past year or so and at our shared experience with the pandemic, I think we can all agree that it is critical that we do everything in our power to get all Virginians back to work and to invigorate the Commonwealth's economy. VEDA's public policy platform aligns with that primary objective, and we wanted to share a little bit about that and to thank Barry for his work also on our board. Specifically, we recommend policy and budgetary action in three main areas as you're thinking about the plan for this region and for Virginia. First is having a skilled and available workforce. We're convinced that the future of Virginia's economic development success is the attraction, development, and the retention of the talent. VEDA supports the Virginia Jobs Investment Program, fondly known as VJIP to many of us. We also support the Virginia Talent Accelerator Program. These are two complementary efforts that provide economic development projects with critical workforce training support, and they've made an impact across GO Virginia Region 3. VEDA is also in favor of additional funding to build on the success of the Workforce Credential Grant, also known as Fast Forward, which is a for performance initiative that creates and sustains a supply of credentialed workers to fill occupations where demand outstrips supply. Our second major public policy focus is promoting economic prosperity for all regions of the Commonwealth of Virginia. To be competitive, we must have fast, reliable ways to move people, goods, energy, and information to and from every corner of the Commonwealth. VEDA supports increased funding for the Virginia Business Ready Sites program and other efforts to provide viable sites for businesses that are looking to locate or expand in Virginia and in our region. Minimizing time and mitigating risk of the path to market make all the difference in today's fast-moving and competitive environment. VEDA also supports funding the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative, as well as maintaining funding for GO Virginia, which is critical to all of us. The third major public policy focus area is developing tools for competitiveness. We must strengthen and grow our economic development toolbox through things like the existing incentives, sound tax policy, the state's marketing program, support for community revitalization, and continued support of Virginia's status as a right-to-work state. As we continue to make strides in these policy-related areas and consider priorities for each of us to work with in Blueprint Virginia, we are confident that Virginia can lead the nation and consistently continue to rank as the best state for business. Thank you for gathering today and to have this important conversation. I look forward to working with you to show the world how resilient our Region 3 economy is and the Commonwealth is when we all work together. Thank you.
Great job, Linda. Thanks so much. And we've heard a lot about workforce. We're going to turn to those who have raised their hand or acknowledged that they want to speak. But Linda, that you listed those priorities, and we've made a note of those important programs. Thank you. I'd like to call on our partner in the Danville-Pittsylvania Chamber, Alexis Earhart, first. Alexis, thank you for the great work you are doing and have obviously done in this area. And let me acknowledge you for a few words. And then after you, I'll call on Ben Davenport. So I'll let people know in advance. Alexis, welcome, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Barry. And thank you particularly for letting me speak before Ben. I appreciate that. Appreciate your leadership in the Virginia Chamber. We rely on you and your team so much and are just grateful for everything that you do to support our region and the Commonwealth as a whole. Just wanted to mention two things quickly today as we think about the next blueprint. And the first, as I think we'd all agree, is just really having a focus on how we can maintain that pro-business climate around right to work, subsequent wage increases, funding for enterprise zones and state-directed incentive programs. Barry, you pointed out the new business development here, and I'm just looking right at Linda Green because she and her team are just extraordinary. And I think one of the primary reasons, outside of the fact that they're extraordinary, that they're successful is because we have a business climate that makes their job easier. And so anything we can do to help to support you in that and that the Virginia Chamber can do is we're grateful for. The other piece I would just mention quickly is early childhood and childcare more broadly. We're extremely fortunate to have just a gold standard Smart Beginnings affiliate here in Danville-Pittsylvania. And we know, particularly in the pandemic, how critical childcare and the lack thereof has been, not only for children, but for businesses and for parents, particularly women who we're seeing in the largest numbers ever are still out of the workforce. And so it's exacerbated by the fact that we have childcare deserts across Region 3 already. There's little to no care offered outside of that sort of traditional 8 to 5 timeframe. And so as we think about the future and the next blueprint, we think about the policy implications of, more funding, whether it's through tax credits, supporting businesses, increasing to professional development and education for our childcare professionals. All of those things are incredibly important, and we look forward to continuing and being part of that conversation.
Thank you for raising that. I had a very large employer tell me months ago, Alexis, that if we don't solve the childcare problem, we won't solve the workforce problem. And I've seen businesses that are taking steps to do that, but we need a more comprehensive strategy. So thank you for mentioning that, and thanks for speaking. Let me recognize Ben Davenport at this time. Ben, welcome to the conversation, and thanks for all your great leadership.
And Ben, you've been promoted as a panelist. You can go ahead and turn your camera on. And just so I'm recognizing everybody in order, after Ben, it will be Pickett, and then after Pickett, it will be Mitzi.
All right, I think I got myself down. Well, I think it's obvious that I didn't connect with Alexis before to understand what she was going to say, but I feel like the Achilles heel in so much of Virginia. And Barry, from our dealings with GO Virginia, I've been on the state board of GO Virginia, and and also on the state board of the Virginia Early Childhood Foundation. Child care is something that somehow we overlook in many aspects, but the Achilles heel of so many of our workers coming back to work deals with affordable child care. And so I think Blueprint Virginia does a fantastic job of connecting with so many of the critical parts about workforce training, about industrial development, about making this a business-friendly state. But I would argue that the state that does the best job of having affordable child care that's going to be a real boost to their future success.
Thank you for those comments, and we're making note of them as we go. Is it Pickett next, Nicole?
Yes, I am going to make you an attendee. And Pickett, you should be able to turn your camera on and unmute yourself, and thank you for participating.
Okay. I run a bed and breakfast in South Boston, and this comment really has little to do with bed and breakfast, but this region was prospered through textiles and tobacco. Textiles went away, tobacco's bad for you, kills you in every which way. Now we have a chance again with marijuana. Marijuana, there are 8 states that have legalized marijuana. And I just want to hit a little bit of how much money they're making in tax revenue from this. And I'm really, I'm not giving specific amounts. Illinois is making the least, and it's making $53 million. California is making the most, and it's making over $1 billion. We have a great opportunity here. We already set up for hemp and that production. It just needs to be handled well through the government, through the region, and it could really boom in this area. It combines both farming, which we are still doing to a certain extent, and the production and the processing and the selling. There's just so much potential in that area. And I'd really like to see it work well in this area, because I think it has always had potential to do it, as you can tell by the number of people who've been arrested for growing it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for those observations, and thank you for joining and participating today. Nicole, who do we have next that we're calling on? We have a few more minutes. We're going to extend this if we need to 1:10, but let me ask you who is in the queue.
Yes, so Mitzi, I just promoted you as a panelist, so you should be able to turn your camera on and unmute yourself, and we appreciate you serving as a co-host today.
There she is.
Hi, good afternoon, Barry, Linda, Nicole. Thank you for letting me come in and address this. Thank you for all the work, Barry, you're doing in the state of Virginia. I'd just like to point out a few things. I think it's extremely important on focusing on getting Virginians back to work. I know many of our employers are struggling to fill open positions on all skill levels. So important to provide ways to get those people back to work, and also to support our business community, our small employers as well. They are the heart of our community, at least. Continue to support broadband expansion efforts, especially important here in Southern Virginia, and ditto to what Alexis and Mr. Davenport said on childcare. That's so needed in our community and across the region.
Thank you so much, Mitzi, and for weighing in and lending your voice to some of those top priorities that we're hearing. I think we have one question in the chat. I'm going to ask Nicole to address that, and then I'm going to call on Alan Witt in just a few minutes so we can end on time. But Nicole, who do we have up, or what comments do you have?
Yes, I'm happy to go ahead and read a question from the chat. And as a reminder, if anybody else would like to provide observations, please go ahead and raise your hand. We have until 1:10, so about 10 minutes to wrap up. And actually, this may be a question that Linda and Randy want to touch on as well, but she appreciates the collaborative and bottom-up approach, and actually wanted to know if agribusiness is going to be included as an important sector as part of the Blueprint Virginia 2030 process, and I certainly know it is. So I'll turn to you, Barry, to provide your observations. But if Randy and Linda, you want to chime in on the importance of this sector as well, we'd welcome you to do so.
Thank you for that question. I was fortunate to spend 4 years as Virginia Secretary of Commerce and Trade, and at that time we didn't have a Secretary of Agriculture. That responsibility came under the Secretary of Commerce. Agriculture is one of our largest industries in the Commonwealth and certainly will be a part of our blueprint process. But I know your region also is uniquely aware of that. And I would turn Linda to you or to Randy to make some comments about where agriculture fits in, Linda, in your economic development plan. So I'll turn it to you for your regional priority.
Randy, are you still with us? Do you want to start?
You can go ahead, Linda.
Okay. I would say in our core sectors that agriculture is directly tied to those, and I'll give you a couple of examples. Our wood products directly addresses the forestry suppliers and subset that feeds those manufacturers. So while it may not be identified as a core sector, it is a core supplier to that sector and is addressed accordingly. Similarly, with our ag and our food and beverage products across the region, we have a number of companies that are involved in the aphid program with the state, and their suppliers again directly linked to the manufacturing process. So we're addressing both of those as suppliers to core sectors. As you said, ag and forestry is still number one across our region, and we do continue to support those projects readily. You'll see even in our economic development announcements, they take equal priority. And so we're always cognizant of that and consider them right along with our core sectors.
Thanks, Linda. Randy, do you want to add any comment?
I think the only thing I'll add is that we do have high value natural resources, which in our region, most of that is wood products. Is one of our primary sectors for and really trying to figure out a way to go beyond just cutting the trees and taking them to a mill, but how do we get the next level, the production and the conversion of those that lumber or those wood products into the actual product that might be used in building or whatever it might be. So yeah, it's a big deal for us. We actually had a study done early on in GO Virginia Region 3 that talked about some of the things we might do to push that along a little bit. Obviously, ag. I mean, Barry, I guess I'm like you. I grew up on a tobacco farm, so been there, done that, and ag is always close to my heart. So, obviously, anything we can do that enables the agriculture in our area to expand and become more profitable, and figure out a way that we can attract more young farmers to the area. I think the last time I looked, the average age of a farmer was basically at retirement age. So that's certainly important for us, and figuring out a way that those youngsters can continue to farm and can see that as a viable outlet is certainly important to us.
Thank you both for weighing in. I do want to ask Nicole to read a comment. I think Jim Dyke, our former Secretary of Education and who's helped us with Blueprint, has a comment. So let me ask Nicole to review that, and then I'm going to call on Alan Witt, our chair.
Yes, and I'm going to ask a member of our team to go ahead and promote Alan now so we can get him started. There were a couple of comments on this. Jim Dyke was the last one, but we also saw a comment from Dr. Tiffany Franks with Averett University as well, comment on this of the importance of early childhood education and childcare. Jim Dyke did mention the Virginia Promise Partnership effort that Ben Davenport is also a part of. I think, in all of our regional meetings, we've consistently seen a great theme of the importance of fostering greater early childhood education, greater access to child care. We do have a great partnership with the Early Childhood Foundation in Virginia. So I'll turn to Barry to see if he has any comments on that, and then we'll turn it over to you, Alan.
Yeah, I completely support that. Thank you all for your good work. I will adjourn us in just a moment, but I want you all to know that our chair this year, elected in January, is Alan Witt. He served on our board for many years. He is also served across the Commonwealth in a number of positions, including the Commonwealth Transportation Board. But probably I've admired Alan's entrepreneurship as a person who 40 years ago started an accounting firm and grew it to one of the largest regional accounting firms in the country, PB Mayers. And he has stepped into an emeritus position with that accounting firm, but now is a resident at the Luter School of Business at Christopher Newport University. Alan serves as our chair. I want to thank Alan for bringing some comments on behalf of the board. Alan, I'll turn it to you before I adjourn.
Very good, Barry. Thank you very much. It's my honor to serve as the chairman of the board of the Virginia Chamber this year, especially as we're going through this process to develop Blueprint Virginia 2030. Linda and Randy, thank you for your comments. And then those who spoke up today, Alexis, Ben, Pickett, and Mitzi, thank you all. These regional meetings are only successful if people are willing to come forward and make some comments as we're putting together this information, because discussions like these are important to ensure the voices of members of business community throughout all the regions of Virginia are represented in the Blueprint Virginia 2030 process. And I appreciate, Barry, the opportunity today for you to call on me to provide a few observations. We've seen from the preliminary results of today's survey the need for greater availability of broadband. That remains a top concern, and with good reason. Reliable, connected, and low-cost infrastructure, whether it's broadband or electricity, water, transportation, all these things ensure prosperity and growth. Furthermore, we need to continue to place a special economic development focus on rural Virginia, including marketing, as I said, expanding broadband coverage, expanded site inventory, and sector-specific customized talent development initiatives. We've heard today also the need for affordable childcare. That's true in every region and certainly very true in yours. Getting Virginians back to work, and of course, agribusiness of all types is extremely important to your area, the Commonwealth. So on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Chamber, I want to thank all of you for being here with us today as we go through this effort to foster greater regional cooperation throughout this Blueprint Virginia 2030 development process. Barry, thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, Alan. Ladies and gentlemen, we really appreciate you participating. A fantastic turnout today, a wonderful overview of the priorities of your region. And as we develop Blueprint Virginia, we'll be sure to include these regional themes in our statewide observations and recommendations to public policymakers. And then the Chamber will work with your local business community and associations and chambers to advocate for these business principles in the months and years to come. Thank you again for participating. Thanks to all the team members for supporting this effort. And I think working together, we will not only create a blueprint that reflects the business priorities, we'll create a brighter future for your region and the Commonwealth of Virginia. So with that, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you all for attending today.